I met my future wife, Isabella, when I was 24, not 20, as some might think. After I graduated, I worked as a legal assistant at a construction site, while Tina, now my wife, worked as a nurse in a local hospital. Our paths crossed through mutual friends, and after a whirlwind romance, we tied the knot just 6 months later. We moved in with my mom in her modest 3-bedroom apartment, and a year after that, we welcomed our son, Tony. 2 years later, our daughter, Harper, arrived. Those were the wild, unforgettable minutes. Tough times, no doubt. Jobs were scarce, and we were scraping by with odd jobs here and there. Tina's salary as a nurse barely covered the basics, but we made do as best as we could. At one point, an old classmate reached out to me with a job offer. He was running a construction business building wooden baths, saunas, and gazebos, and there was plenty of work to go around. The pay was great. Life started to look up. As the new millennium rolled in, things improved further, and my classmate offered to sell me the business. Without hesitation, I jumped at the chance, and from that point on, our lives really began to turn around. Isabella decided to leave her nursing job, went back to school, and became a cosmetologist. I bought a room for her, and she opened a small beauty salon there. The children grew up quickly. They both graduated from university. Tony continued his studies at the institute and eventually found a job abroad. Harper graduated with a degree in foreign languages and married a guy who, by the way, now works for me. They are doing well, and they have given us a beloved grandson, followed by a granddaughter. Everything is very good on their part. My son-in-law is a respectable, respectful guy. And now I'm starting to think about passing the baton of business to him so that I can finally relax and enjoy life. To be honest, I've been exhausted by all this work over the last few years. My dream is simple: to live in a country house, grow my own vegetables, and spend time with my grandchildren. But here's the hitch. Isabella and I couldn't be more different when it comes to our vision for a peaceful, comfortable retirement. Don't get me wrong. I'm 54, and the constant hustle is just too much for me now. But for Isabella, life is only getting more exciting. In her 50s, she's completely reinvented herself. I've already gone through all the beauty treatments, and honestly, my face doesn't even look like mine anymore. But don't get the wrong idea. I'm not some grumpy old man. I try to keep fit and look after myself, and I believe in moderation in everything. Isabella, on the other hand, seems determined to turn back time. She told me she wanted to do all the things she couldn't afford in her youth. She asked me not to bother her with thoughts of grandkids or country living. I respect her desire, of course, and I want her to be happy. The only thing I managed to convince her to do was renovate the country house. She agreed, and not long after, she hired a designer. She showed me the plans, and the workers soon began major renovations. 3 months later, my accountant handed me a bill, a very hefty one, for signature. I was shocked, honestly. Turns out, my wife had instructed the designer to charge me for his services under the contract. I signed the bill, but I couldn't help myself. I had to call her up. Isabella, don't you think this designer's bill seems a little excessive, given the amount of work that's been done? Or did you somehow find the most expensive designer in town? I asked, a bit more bluntly than I intended. The repairs haven't been completed yet, and we'll still have to pay. And anyway, he's the best, she snapped back. Her tone stung a little. Designer, she emphasized, almost daring me to argue. I didn't like what he did at all, and I told you about it. I said, frustration creeping into my voice. Paying for the entire crew turned out to be cheaper, honestly. It's like we're paying him for his good looks, not his work. If you don't like it, you should have handled it yourself. Isabella shot back, her words cold and sharp, before hanging up the phone. Lately, our relationship had become tense, like we were living in entirely different worlds. She was always busy with something, endlessly studying, constantly preoccupied. Meanwhile, I was stuck with the kids, working hard, and trying to keep everything together. We made the decision as a family, me, our daughter, and my son-in-law, to spend the summer in the country. As the final touch, I wanted to install a security system to protect my loved ones fully. I found a company, and within a few days, everything was up and running. I could now check the cameras whenever I wanted, ensuring everything was in order. Getting interested, I decided to test it one day. I logged in from my work computer and started watching the footage. What I saw made me freeze in place. There was my rejuvenated wife, Isabella, who acted like she was head over heels in love. No, she spent a lot of time with our designer, a young and talented one whom we hired to renovate. They evaluated new repairs several times a week, always talking enthusiastically and laughing together. Isabella knew the value of the work she had done, but fortunately she didn't realize that I was watching them. That was when the truth hit me. My wife was playing a dangerous game. The designer, barely in his 30s, was half her age. It was absurd. My jaw tightened. This was too much. The conversation I had with Isabella afterward was short, too short. I simply wished her the best in her new life, in whatever form it took. She denied it at first, of course. But when I showed her the footage from the cameras, she had no choice but to confess. "We love each other," she said quietly, almost shamefully. "This is the love of my life." I stared at her, a sinking feeling settling in my stomach. I thought to myself, maybe the saying should be women are fools, not because they're truly foolish, but because they're women. It was as if I were watching the inevitable unfold right in front of me. I moved to the country shortly after, still working my business, but with the plan to eventually hand it over to my son-in-law. I taught him everything I knew, and he was a natural. I trusted him completely. Meanwhile, Isabella's designer was living the high life at her expense, taking full advantage of her generosity. He loved strolling around with young, beautiful girls, all the while pretending to be in love with my wife. I couldn't help but wonder when Isabella would finally open her eyes to what was happening. A month ago, my daughter broke the news to me. "Dad," she said, "he left Mom. He found a more profitable option." Turns out, he was now involved with the daughter of a local politician. And, surprise, she was pregnant with his child. My daughter told me that Isabella had been crying, regretting everything, and wanted to come back. But her pride, her shame, kept her from doing it. Honestly, I didn't care. As for me, I still live outside the city. I work at my own pace. I was able to gradually transfer my business to my son-in-law, who is more than capable of taking over. And you know what? I stopped worrying about all this. Kids may not get along with their mom, but that's their problem, not mine.